I love RPGs. Ever since the first time I played Super Mario RPG when it released back in early 1996 in 5th grade, I was hooked on the genre. It was my first time ever playing anything like it. Timed hits and timed blocks were fun to learn and really added some fun and complexity to the gameplay, and the music and story really ingrained itself into my heart. From there, I branched out to Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, the latter of which got me hooked on that particular franchise. Ever since, I've played a host of turn-based and action RPGs across a variety of systems. Some have really been memorable, while others were fun for the time but didn't leave the lasting impression that those earlier titles did. And unfortunately, the last several years haven't really improved things. Sure, the Persona series has been pretty reliable, and I've enjoyed Final Fantasy XIV immensely, even if other entries in the franchise have been a little hit or miss, to say nothing of Dawn Trail's lackluster showing at release. However, about a year ago, a little trailer caught my attention and I decided to follow the development of this indie RPG that was set to release in 2025, and boy am I ever glad that I did. If you've been following anything in gaming over the last couple weeks, you've no doubt come across a little title called Clair Obscur Expedition 33. To put it mildly, the game has been selling like crazy, and the rapid increase has been largely because of word of mouth. It went out on Game Pass right away, and even digital copies were available at a discount, and this is already significant since the game itself was only $49.99, which is absurdly cheap these days in comparison to your average game release. While that may account for some of the initial sales numbers, the biggest reason it's been going so well is because, well, the game is just really, really good and gives RPG fans like myself something to sink our teeth into. And we've been wanting a game like this for a long time, and while it's not as though we haven't had moderately enjoyable releases over the last several years, they haven't quite hit the spot like this one has. At least not for me. There's really no singular reason why, either. Everything, from the environment, the characters, the story, the soundtrack, and the combat, have all come together to deliver an experience that much larger titles like Final Fantasy XVI just weren't quite able to manage. So in case you aren't up to speed, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was developed by Sandfall Studios, which is mostly a collection of former Ubisoft refugees who had the revolutionary idea of making games that were, fun, and actually finished on release. What if the characters were actually appealing to look at? What if combat was engaging and the story was timeless and not preachy? Essentially, what if the game was the opposite of Concord? It takes influence from a number of RPGs like Final Fantasy X, Super Mario RPG, Legend of Dragoon, and some would say even the Souls series. While it has taken inspiration from many JRPGs, it was made in France, so it's technically not a JRPG. Or is it?
It's French. Therefore, it's a JRPG.
Perhaps instead of calling it a JRPG, we could call it a French role-playing game. Well, that's an unfortunate acronym. The premise of the game is quite simple. Once a year, an entity known as the Paintress paints a number on the outside of a great monolith, and everyone of that age is immediately wiped out in an event called the Gamage. Now, I don't think it's directly addressed in the plot, but I got to thinking, what if you were supposed to turn 33 a week after the number gets painted? Do you automatically gamage when you turn 33, or do you get to be 33 but then disappear after the next number gets painted? These are the questions that keep me up at night. Anyway, after that age group gets Thanos snapped away, a good selection of individuals from the next group in line, those 32 years of age in this case, set out on an expedition to defeat the Paintress and put a stop to the yearly cycle, which at this point has been going on for 67 years. And with all their preparations in order, the expedition sets out with our main cast of Gustave, Ciel, Mael, and Lune, and a bunch of other cannon fodder. Wait, did I say cannon fodder? Oh, that's right, folks. The expedition gets almost completely wiped out right away, immediately setting the tone for how bleak the world is and just what it is the survivors of Expedition 33 are up against. Along the way, they meet other characters such as the lovable Esquier, Clive Verso, and one of Verso's longtime friends, a gestural named Monoko. There are other NPCs you meet, mostly gesturals, as well as a few other mysterious characters who play a massive role in the fate of the world, but initially, it's the task of picking yourself up, coming to grips with being the sole survivors of a doomed expedition and being the only thing at this point between the citizens of Lumina and another Gamage for those at 32, or those who may have turned 33 after the Gamage. Again, not terribly clear on that. Well, now that we have that introduction out of the way, what is it you can expect in Expedition 33? Well, first and foremost, let's talk about the gameplay itself. As mentioned earlier, you have an interesting roster of characters, each with their own set of mechanics. Both Gustav and Verso serve as characters who can deal high break damage, which will stun an enemy for at least one round, allowing you to continue smacking the bejesus out of them. Mael has different sword stances, which either boost strength, defense, or both. Attacks will tell you which stance she'll be in, so you can plan accordingly. Ciel works really well as someone who can buff other party members and debuff enemies. Minoko is essentially the blue mage of the group, but instead of learning attacks by getting hit, you learn them by killing the enemies themselves, whether you see particular skills or not. Each enemy skill is tied to a particular mask type, which gets rotated through via a wheel in the HUD during the battle. Depending on the position of the wheel, you'll gain a bonus to certain skills based on the description of that skill. And last but not least is Lune, who generates elemental stains during battle based on whatever skill she uses. You consume stains to gain buffs to other attacks for bonus damage or extra turns. As with any other skill, the font color will change when you're able to use a buffed skill. As a general rule, using buffed skills is the key to playing Lune correctly, but that applies to pretty much any character. While navigating the open world, you can click L3 to rotate through who the party leader is, which has absolutely no impact on combat, only who you get to see on screen. So, if you have a favorite character, you can have them on screen as the lead, and you'll follow them around. And for a lot of you, if you have a particular fetish, you'll be using Lune the entire time. That's right, it seems as though one of the devs at Sandfall is one of the many feet bros out there.
One of us, Google gobble, Google gobble, one of us.
Just know that seeing your surroundings is going to be a little difficult if you guys keep angling the camera downward.
Do you know what I'm doing right now? I'm judging you. I'm staring deep into your soul right now. I know you rarely have contact with other human beings. So let this be a heart-to-heart moment. I'm asking you to get some help.
So, here you go, Feet Bros. They finally made a character just for us. I mean, just for you. A character just for you.
You might notice at the top of the list with the little stars, there's a couple golden stars there. Those are just for you, Feet Bros. This is a good guidebook to follow on life. If you're ever thinking, wow, that made me feel stimulated in the nether regions, you should come back to this list and see if the thing that stimulated you was on this list, and if it was, you can kill yourself.
And maybe that's what one of the last overworld tracks of the game was really singing about. Speaking of your surroundings, when you guys aren't trying to watch Lune's feet the entire time, you'll be paying attention to your surroundings because there's no mini-map in this game. And when I first heard this, I thought it might be a bit of a drawback, and people could get lost very easily since, let's face it, we've all sort of gotten used to there being one on screen that shows us our objective markers as well. The only time there's really an objective marker anywhere is on the map of the world, and that just shows you where the next story zone is. Quests that you pick up from NPCs aren't noted anywhere at all. Now again, that sounds like it could be a problem, and if you were playing something like, Xenoblade Chronicles X, also known as Side Quests the game, then that would be a very daunting and discouraging thing to deal with indeed. Fortunately, just about everything you need is located within the same zone you received the quests. There are some collectibles out on the world map that can be a bit troublesome to find without a guide, but generally speaking, if you just explore every little forest and camp on the map, you'll find most of these without much trouble. And completing quests will either net you a cool weapon, glamour, or some really good Pictos. And what are Pictos, you ask? Well, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Pictos are the bread and butter of how you build your characters. They are essentially the armor/accessories of the game. And whenever you get a Picto, you can only equip that skill on one character. Each Picto comes with a base stat that will increase, such as health, speed, and critical hit chance, while other Pictos usually have 2. Once you equip a Picto to a character, you need to win 4 fights with that Picto equipped to master it, which will then allow any character to equip that skill. However, there is only one of each Picto, so you can equip a Picto to one character for free, but if you want other characters to use that skill, you'll need to use something called Lumina. These are basically your skill points. You increase these through leveling up or through using consumable items, which grant you 1 additional Lumina per use. In fact, there is a late game merchant you can fight over and over to farm these items to drastically increase the amount of skill points you have, and thus the amount of skills you can equip, which will allow for some disgustingly overpowered builds. Even with the first balance patch that just came out as of the time of this writing, there are still ways to one-shot just about every boss in the game. Now, you don't have to do this. In fact, these don't even become an option until Act 3, and even then you sorta need to grind out some levels before you can even start having the amount of skill points necessary to start pushing into it, so don't worry. It's not like you'll just accidentally become severely OP. For me, by the time I got to this point in the game, I was just wanting to finish the story and wrap up my playthrough. But was that because the game was boring or I wasn't enjoying it anymore? Not at all, but I do have other things I need to be doing besides just playing this game. I had already put in about 30 to 40 hours into the main story, and without breaking the game, all the challenges and side content could have easily added about half that, if not flat out doubled my playtime. That said, if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to break the game too quickly, I would advise not spending too much time doing the side content in Act 3, and just progress through the main story. By the time I was done, I was already level 99, and was doing tens of millions of damage to everything and wiping them out in one round, even the secret super boss Simon. Do I regret it? Maybe a little, but I can always go back through the game again and nerf myself. I do sort of regret not giving him a fair chance my first try, but on the other hand, big numbers are always fun too. I did the same sort of thing in Final Fantasy X and had everyone doing 99,999 damage overkills to every boss except Omega Weapon and Nemesis. But I think all my stats are at 255 anyway, so it's not like he could do anything to me anyway. All of the final bosses died in one hit. It was satisfying for me, because, as I always say, there's no kill like overkill. So I took the same approach here in Clair Obscur. But you ruined the challenge of the game, that's not fun. And to that I say that the devs have encouraged players to do this. So, if you have a problem with getting rid of any challenge and stomping the final bosses into the next millennium, then don't. You play the game your way, and I'll play it the right way. It's fine. Everyone's happy. Speaking of upping your stats, whenever you level up, you'll gain 3 points you can put towards your attributes. And distribution of these points is up to you, but the type of weapon you have equipped can influence this as well. Certain weapons have affinity with certain attributes, and putting points into the attributes assigned to these weapons can help other stats increase as well. As mentioned earlier, critical rate is going to be one you'll want to keep at about 100%. Going higher does nothing, so overcapping luck should be avoided as much as possible. That said, luck can usually be capped by equipping Pictos later in the game, so don't worry about putting many points into luck throughout the game. Fortunately, you can respec your attributes whenever you want, assuming you have the consumable item that lets you do this, and you can get quite a few of them throughout the game. Most of this isn't a huge issue, since parrying and dodging will allow you to still kill enemies and bosses even if your stats aren't quite where you want them. In late game, as long as your critical rate, agility rate, and might stats are high, you shouldn't have too much trouble once you learn the various enemy patterns. As for the rest of the combat, the game follows a traditional turn-based structure, and, like Final Fantasy X, shows your turn order. So, looking at the left side of the screen shows you when you're about to get attacked, and you can plan accordingly. Base attacks don't require any special inputs, but skill-based attacks require an input to do some bonus damage. These pop on the screen sort of like a quick time event, but in practice it's no different from how timed hits work in Super Mario RPG. Enemy attacks can either be dodged or parried, which is something all you Dark Souls masochists will probably claim is so easy a baby can do it, because you've been so sweaty about From Software titles that you can beat Elden Ring blindfolded with a left-handed Guitar Hero controller, if such a thing existed. And it might, but I'm too lazy to check. For the rest of us who have lives, this may take a little getting used to. The good thing is that in addition to the enemy animations, there's usually some sort of audio cue that will help you learn when to either dodge or parry. Dodging gives you a larger window of frames to do this in, while the timing for parrying enemy attacks is much tighter. The good thing is that if you start dodging and you get to the point where instead of saying the word dodge, you see perfect, that means you've also dodged at the exact moment you can parry. So, once you start perfect dodging attacks, just hit the parry button instead. Most of the time, if you parry all of an enemy's attacks, you'll perform a counterattack, which can deal some nice extra damage or, depending on the enemy's health, finish the fight altogether. And with the variety of enemies that there are quite a few patterns to learn. There are even some mini-games and side quests that require you to perfectly parry every single one of a particular attack, which will help you fight the real thing. There are also chromatic versions of enemies, which are much stronger versions of the normal enemies, which give a lot of XP and usually some good Pictos. Still, you'll need to be on top of your dodging and parrying game to overcome these challenges, and some of them are brutal. One mistake, and you can get one shot easily. However, if you can get it down to an art and memorize the attack patterns, you can take on enemies that used to give you trouble and wipe them all out without taking any damage. Again, that's about the only downside to building a one-shot build, but there's always New Game Plus, which adds some more difficulty and allows you to do it again a different way if you should so choose. Oh, and before I forget, this game does have a world map. I mentioned there being a map you can look at, but there's actually a world map you can run around on and explore. Just like the RPGs of yore, the world map shows your smaller characters on a giant map, but it's in a 3D environment and you can even see certain enemies and special bosses wandering around as you explore, such as some of the aforementioned chromatic enemies. This is one of the things I really wish Final Fantasy XVI had done. And for all of the good things I enjoyed about the game, the non-dungeon zones felt incredibly empty. There really wasn't any reason to ever go exploring outside of a side quest that boiled down to go here and get thing, then return to start. Sure, there was the occasional hunt mark, but overall the world just felt empty. In Clair Obscur, there's a reason to go exploring out in the world. There's a reason to explore every part of a dungeon. Not only were there good challenges that could be found and fought, but the world was so beautiful I couldn't help but want to see everything the developers had crafted. There are even some mini games you'll find, such as a climbing challenge, which, if you ever did any of the jumping puzzles in Final Fantasy XIV, you'll feel right at home here. None of the other challenges irked me as much as this one, but it never felt unfair. The controls were tight and responsive, so if I messed up, it was all on me. Still, climbing this thing takes several minutes, so it's not only a combination of skill, but endurance, since you have to stay focused. Again, exploration is well worth it, and I'm glad there was an incentive to explore, unlike in some other titles I've played recently. I'll come back to this point in a moment. So we've talked about combat and exploration, but with any good RPG, we need to have a solid story. Gameplay is one thing, but if I don't care about why I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm going to lose interest and not play the game. I need there to be some driving incident, some engrossing story that makes me want to see it through to the end. This is why I really hated Breath of the Wild. Blasphemy, I know. Sure, I could run around and do anything I wanted, and sure, there was something going on at Ganon's castle with Zelda. The divine beasts were a thing to deal with, but honestly, things have been going on that way for a long time. If I didn't rescue Zelda, and instead wanted to faff about collecting Korok turds for several hundred hours, who cares? Nothing's going to happen. There's no real sense of urgency behind anything. I could even technically beat it without doing any of that stuff if I just sped run the game and learned to parry and dodge well enough, and have enough weapons to replace one after the other because they break so fast. Who cares if I went on a globe-trotting expedition and played around in optional shrines? If I never found my memories, oh well, guess I just don't know anything that happened with anyone before Link lost his memories. Que sera, sera. The stakes were allegedly high, but far from urgent. The story was practically non-existent. There was nothing that really compelled me to go do anything of substance. I finished the game, but only out of obligation. I can't say I had fun playing it. It's the same reason I had no desire to ever touch Tears of the Kingdom. No thanks. I'm good. Expedition 33, however, has a story that grabs you from the beginning. We all know what happens at the beginning with the Gamage since it's been in trailers, and I knew it was going to be bleak. Even knowing it was going to happen, I still found myself being moved by the scenes. Part of this is due to the incredible soundtrack, and the other is because of the voice performances. I never expected the soundtrack to be as good as it is. I think this is the composer's first major project like this, and he cranked it out of the park. The battle music actually changes with each zone, so there's no singular battle theme you'll hear repeated ad nauseum. The music is at times hauntingly sad and at other times absolutely epic. I never once thought I would hear a battle theme with people doing rock vocals in French and thinking, holy crap, this music just slaps. Alongside the musical score, the voice cast for the main characters is amazing as well. Notably, there's Charlie Cox that plays Gustav, which is also one of the best roles that Robert Pattinson has ever played, without actually playing it. Ben Starr, who plays Clive Verso. Jennifer English, who plays a younger and less edgy version of Shadowheart named Mael, and Gollum himself, Andy Serkis, playing Renoir. Joking aside about Clive and Shadowheart, Ben and Jennifer do an amazing job, as do the rest of the cast, but honestly, Ben, Jennifer, and Andy carry so much of the weight on the story on their shoulders that without them, I don't know if these characters would have been as compelling. There are scenes with Mael where Jennifer's performance just sounds heartbreaking.
I know what you're going to say. You want to offer your condolences. You want to say something comforting. But I don't need it. I've had enough condolences. I've lost so many families now. I just need... Can you please go?
Ben also nails it with Verso, who plays a man who is determined to see these events through, but has also experienced a great amount of loss, but is determined to keep moving forward. I don't want to say much about Renoir's character, but Andy makes Renoir both an intimidating figure when necessary, but a tragic and sympathetic figure when the time comes as well. Honestly, the three of them turned in some of the best performances of any characters I've heard in a long time, and I was absolutely invested in knowing how the story would resolve the conflict with these three in particular. Again, that's not to say that the other characters were bad at all. Esquier is one of my favorite side characters in a game and has the personality of a dog who looks like he doesn't have much going on upstairs but is incredibly loving and loyal.
I am grumpy.
Oh, are you now?
I too am. But I'm also wee. So the wee balances the.
You might say you're a bit, wee-woo, then.
You really get me, Verso.
I'm a bit, wee-woo myself. Although I'm a bit more woo than wee these days. Hey, that one looks a little like Minoko.
Minoko, one of the Gestrels, has a love for fighting that leads to some great interactions with Verso, and the other Gestrels are also amusing creatures who, like Minoko, just love to fight for fighting's sake. Put simply, they are a people after Goku's own heart.
Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot. Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
Now, is Expedition 33 perfect? No, not really. There are some quality of life issues that I had with the UI, and there were some collision issues with certain objects on the map throughout the game. I played on performance mode, and so the frame rate was fine, but shifting to cutscenes was a little weird, but I think with the patch that just came out, some of that may have been fixed, so the transition from the normal gameplay and into certain cutscenes isn't as jarring. Again, you're talking about a small handful of scenes, so it's nothing that just takes you out of the experience. I also wish that the overworld map had a sort of fast travel feature to it. You can fast travel within dungeons and locations once you go in, but the overworld map can sometimes be a pain to navigate when you're bouncing back and forth between locations. Honestly, even all these things feel very nitpicky to me because these are very minor issues, and the world map is so gorgeous and the music is so well done that sure, I would like to get from point A to point B a little faster, especially in Act 3 when you can fly, but did it ruin my enjoyment of the game? Not at all. Like I said, these are very minor gripes, and I hesitate to even mention them since what the game does right far outweighs what it does wrong. And some people complain about the two endings, but I think they fit perfectly well with the themes of the game and the characters involved. Of course, that's another discussion for another time, and I think a full story review would have to be done for that. If you haven't been able to tell by now, I really loved Expedition 33. From start to finish, there wasn't a time I felt that the story dragged on, the characters were irritating, the combat was lackluster, or anything of the sort. Now, there have been some decent turn-based RPGs over the last several years. As I said, I've grown to enjoy the Persona series, and I even played through and completed all of Shin Megami Tensei Vengeance. Even then, Canon of Creation was just sort of meh. Canon of Vengeance was drastically better, but even then, I didn't care as much about the characters as I did in Persona 4 or 5. Sea of Stars was supposed to be a nice love letter to the SNES era of JRPGs and definitely took influence from Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger, but again, there was just something missing. It was almost like it was trying too hard to be like those other games instead of being totally its own thing. For me, it was too easy to say, okay, this is like that plotline from Chrono Trigger. I know what's about to happen. And while there are hints in the story of Expedition 33 that I had a suspicion about some of what was going on, I didn't completely predict what the twist was. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike Sea of Stars. I think it was still an enjoyable game, and it definitely scratched my nostalgia itch, but Expedition 33 has far surpassed my expectations. Even more impressive is the fact that this was done with a very small dev team of about 30 people. This was their first release. How many times have we as gamers complained over the years that games have felt stagnant and don't take risks? I think a large part of that is because once these companies reach a certain size, they're afraid to take risks and potentially lose millions upon millions of dollars, which will predictably upset shareholders. Which, let's be honest, is perfectly understandable. I don't have a problem with corporations as a general rule, but I'm also not going to sit here and deny that the bloat of these companies, the unnecessary amount of committees, focus groups, consultants, and even CEOs shoving their nose into the development process hasn't stifled creativity. We all know it has. The irony is that companies like Square Enix used to be the small studio like Sandfall. Some of their best games that we all remember fondly were back when there was less interference from corporate overlords and more emphasis on creativity and just making fun games. Sure, they wanted their games to make money, obviously. What game developer wants to spend countless hours and a lot of money to make a game that nobody buys and nobody enjoys, thus making their efforts feel meaningless? Nobody. The problem, as I said, is that at some point the size of the teams becomes unnecessarily large. And when you have that many people you're having to pay, you don't want to have to let people go, so what's the easiest thing to do? Make the safest game possible. Shareholders can get upset and cause problems for the people running the company, so play it safe. Make money, make the shareholders happy. Again, in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course you want the people investing in your company to get a return on their investment, so they keep investing. At some point, though, you can't lose sight of what made you the successful game company you were. Expedition 33 and even Silent Hill 2 Remake prove that you don't need hundreds and hundreds of developers and hundreds of millions of dollars to make a good game. You need talent, passion, creativity, and a love for what you're doing. The passion that Sandfall put into this is visible in every area, every song, and every character in the game. This is something that they wanted to make, that they knew they could never make in a major AAA studio. The sad part is that these companies, and I'm not the only one to think this, so this is not a new idea with me, will look at the success of Expedition 33, try to mimic it, miss the point of why it was actually good, and then whine about their failure and blame it on toxic gamers. I mean, Square at one point had said they didn't think a turn-based system would work well with realistic-looking characters. Well, Expedition 33 put the lie to that claim. In fact, Square just put out a survey asking for which battle system fans like best out of the series, and unsurprisingly, most preferred games like 10 and earlier. Were 7, 8, and 9 a little slow in their battles? Yeah, a little bit, which is why the fast-forward feature exists in the remasters, but they were still a blast to play. Some of my best memories of the series are from those games, even though I've always found something to love about every entry in spite of their flaws. I don't know what's going to happen with RPGs in the near future. Do I want to see every game start to become a clone of Expedition 33? Not at all. Do I want them to learn the right lesson? That you don't need a bloated development team to make a good game, and that it's more important to have a team with passion for the industry and a love for storytelling and a love for their audience, having been a member of that audience themselves? Absolutely. Do I think that will happen? I'm cynical enough to say no, but hopefully, more small studios will start to follow suit and get the recognition they deserve. After the success that was Silent Hill 2 Remake, I'm looking forward to Chronos The New Dawn, which I think is slated to come out this year. We don't have to settle for slop, and Expedition 33 is definitely good eating. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and let me know what you thought of the game down in the comments. And if you hated it and disagreed with me, be sure to really emphasize it by hitting that dislike button twice. Until then, guys, you take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.